Hello and welcome to Raising Anchor, your podcast and source for all things Rhode Island FC. I'm your host, Matt Entrican, coming to you on Thursday, July 18th. RIFC hammers the Legion, taking all 3 points in their third consecutive road win and extending their undefeated streak to 6 games, thanks to the fastest goal in club history and a brace from recent signing Zach Herivaux. Joining me to relive all the wizardry performed in Magic City is none other than co-host Jason Carey. Jason, how is it going, my friend?
Doing pretty good. I was just thinking, why do they call it Magic City? Do you know? Should we have asked Kaler?
So I do know he did not expand upon it, but we also didn't ask. So, fair call to him and fair call to us. Magic City got its nickname because Birmingham grew up out of nowhere overnight. Just magically kind of appeared
out of nowhere.
And so there's no it's not David Copperfield's origin story, or there's not an actual defense against the dark arts class taught there. It's nothing.
Magic
nothing
the
actually
Gathering
magical.
wasn't invented there.
It should have been. It absolutely should have been.
Okay.
But that's a loss on them. You would think that they would lean into that. There's a lot of cities that do this is the home of Bigfoot. This is where maybe a vampire existed for one point. So you would think that that's something that does happen. But hey, we are going to have so much fun tonight. It's a long week for us, right? With 2 podcasts, we're coming off of 2 games now. We don't have a preview, so we just get to sit back, relax, and talk about this one. And that's going to be exciting. Maybe we'll actually end a podcast sub 1 hour, 30 minutes. Maybe.
Well, we can keep saying that, but until it happens, I'm not going to believe it.
Why ruin a good thing, right?
Okay.
So let's get into this news on the night. You were doing some research today, and some new things were dropping around the league. What do we got going on?
So something here a little more tangential, but somewhat related. So CBS Sports has acquired the rights to the Carabao Cup and the EFL, not USL, but you do need Paramount Plus for Golasso Network, right, to watch some of our games. So I imagine some of our fans have that. Wrexham has become very popular here in the States. So for any of those following along, they've now been promoted to EFL League One. So that means you'll be able to watch their games on Paramount Plus.
Speaking of Paramount Plus, Sports Golazo Network, CBS Sports in general, a little bit of controversy last night as a couple of people actually reached out to me directly in DMs about how do I watch this game. It was the first game of the year where we were on the official CBS Sports Network, which is strictly related to a cable package. Unless you have some wizardry and some tricks that you can do with a VPN, which we're not going to promote piracy.
Did you send them that meme of Charlie from It's Always Sunny with the
Pepe Silva? I mean, listen, at the end of the day, this is kind of one of those growing pains that the league has to face, where you're getting exposure on the CBS networks, Prime, their Golazo app, and everything else. But to limit a single game, it seems counterintuitive, right? You want access to everything. And on the night, this was a game that may have the lowest watch attend. I'd love to get the Nielsen ratings on this game's review, because the instructions on the day that we were telling people was you got to go to a bar, come join us at the Guild, or you need to be a little bit of a technical mastermind to bypass some international broadcast restrictions. That's difficult. That's great, but that's also not ideal.
Yeah, it's not great. And this is not to condone it, but I think anyone else out there that is a fan of some soccer team abroad, right? Your team could potentially be in the Champions League. You've got your league as well as your various league cup friendlies. If you want to follow your team, it's likely that you are already, shilling out the money for those multiple streaming accesses. So it's just a thing that we don't like to see. It's important that we say, hey, this isn't cool. And maybe at some point they'll listen to us, but for the time being, maybe for these games, you maybe pick and choose, right? Say, hey, I can get this one, but for all these games, maybe this is the one you go out to the bar. Right. You don't have to go out to every game, but a lot of times it can be significantly more fun to watch it with fellow fans.
And the Guild is always a great watch party. They were recently on the subreddit in Rhode Island of hey, where are the happiest drunks in Rhode Island? Well, it's the RIFC and specifically Defiance 1636 fans at the Guild on away days. So absolutely go out there for any game. But it's interesting too, though, with the whole CBS deal. we actually got a chance to sit down with a bunch of other reporters and ask the league office some questions about kind of like, this is the middle of the season, what's going on with the league, what are the up and coming things. A lot of focus was on the Super League because they're about to enter Division I play. That's a very big moment, very historic moment for them. But we got to get some other nuance. We talked about expansion, like what clubs were actually ready to go on the timetables they had earlier committed to. What did ProRail come up to as a conversation again? But one of the questions that we asked about how the CBS deal actually worked at the beginning of the season, because there was only originally 3 games that were going to be on CBS Prime. I'll call it Prime. And we were looking at how like certain games made it on the Golazo network, certain games made it on the CBS Sports network. Originally, our highest level of watched game was going to technically be the Birmingham game. And then later we got added to prime time against Detroit City in August. And when we asked like, hey, what's going on with that? The league was very honest about it. They said, yeah, some teams are not going to get coverage because they don't represent the league. They don't show the branding. Like when you do the pan out and there's unfortunately maybe 6 fans on one side of the stadium,
certain Miami team, maybe
I'm not gonna point out names because Birmingham looked a little light on the night itself too. And that is more of a, you're playing in a, that was a 60,000 stadium, 20,000. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but
it was a big looking stadium.
It's a huge stadium. So like that's the unfortunate unintended consequence of playing in that.
But there's always that thing where you don't know how many people are behind the camera, right? They should do better about like, hey, everyone go over there.
Yeah, I would literally put tarps up, block seats, and force everyone down, like closer into the bowl. But anyways, the league said like, yeah, if you want these broadcast packages, you're going to have to go and get them at a place where you're showing and you're bringing in the fans and you're creating an electric atmosphere that highlights what this league is trying to become. So they didn't play nice. They didn't say like, oh, everyone will get one game and it'll be on this network. It was like, hey, yeah, if you're not Louisville right now, like you need to go become the Louisville. You need to build a soccer specific stadium. You need to fill it consistently. You need to have an exciting product on the pitch. So you can't be,
the organizations need to do their jobs to not only like promote their team, but like the experience itself, right? Try and get people into the stadiums.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll have a write-up on the league interview, and we'll probably put that to the Blazing Musket if they don't take the interview recording and do it themselves. So excited to get that out to fans at a later date. But let's talk. We are back in the playoffs, baby. We did it. We got there. We've called it a day. I know we're going to unpack the table probably at the end, but like, let's just get straight to the playoffs right now. I don't think, honestly, there's a team that we can't beat in this moment in time, as hot as we are. Like if the playoffs started today, is there an actual team that you fear when the season is on the line? I think this team has the chops to get it done.
Yeah, I think that there's still, we saw recently with Indy, that first half was a little flat. So there's still like some concerns, but the fact that they were able to turn it on in the second half, I'm not too worried. I think on our best day, there's anyone that we can beat. There's still just that like hope that we don't kind of forget or lose that momentum and kind of slide back into that nonsense that we kind of had to endure.
Yeah. And hey, listen, Tim agrees with me. So that's all I need at the end of the day, right?
There you go.
So let's get into this game. Miami out the door. We've moved on to Birmingham. We take all 3 points at their field. So this is the 3rd consecutive win. We're now on a 6-game undefeated streak. Let's get into this. So let's talk formations first and foremost. A little bit of a surprise on the night, and we didn't predict it for once. So we still got the wrong Wednesday, but our guest host, he basically got it right.
Yeah, for the most part there. I wasn't sure that Stoneman was ready to come right back in, so I was a little concerned that maybe we were going to see Holstead still kind of play that right center back role. But Stoneman looked good on the night. I think he's kind of finally gotten back to that match fitness, which is great too, now that he's got another 10-day rest there to make sure that he's not, pulling anything. In terms of, this lineup,
so it's a 3-5-2. Koke obviously continues to be in goal now. You've got Stoneman, like you said, and the back 3 along with Yao and Nodarse. Nothing really surprising there, although there will be questions, I think, in the games to come on exactly what that back 3 will look like. And then you have Turnbull, Holstead resuming his position rightfully as a right midfielder, a number 8, with Fusan leading the charge in the front. Not McGlynn, which is, I think, the important thing to note there. And that paid dividends on the night immediately. Mark Ibarra, Jose Quizera in that midfield five, and then Chico and JJ Williams in the striker pair up front. Besides the fact that Stoney came in, I guess I have a question for you and for anyone listening. Is this the lineup that is the best 11 that we've had all season? Like, is this it?
Potentially. There was, I kind of have had high hopes for Connor McGlynn. I don't know if we've really seen his full potential, so I don't know. But I guess at this moment in time, this is probably the best 11 we have, right?
So there's no one else you would substitute in for. You that's play that for the until the wheels fall off at this point.
Pretty much.
Okay. I don't know if I agree with that. I have some takes that we'll talk about a little later that I'd like to see happen. But nevertheless, that you still love to see it happen. Aaron writes in, RIFC is currently 5-4-10. So is that a winning record in soccer? So technically, and this is like the oldest debate I've ever seen, there are purists and then there are like American fans, and it's how you read the table. Some will say it's the way you can earn points. So it's wins, then draws, then losses. But since most sports don't create the ability to have a tie that's at least tracked in any sense, you usually would you would say it 5-4-10. So that I see it both ways. But yeah, I would say as long as our goal differential is positive, which we now are, we've scored in our 5th game with at least 3 goals or more. And technically 6 games we've scored 2 goals or more. Yeah, I would say this is a winning record right now. Justin writes in, Yao out, Gabby in. I respect that. We'll talk about that a little bit more. It's going to be hard for Yao to get off of this pitch at this point. Like he's earned it, and we're going to show some stats in a minute that literally kind of show like how important he's been, right or wrong, with everything that's going on. Nate writes in, anchors up, RIFC. Right back at you, Nate. But yeah, so let's get into this. Let's get into the basics of it. Like let's get back to what we love to talk about, and that's all things stats. So on the screen, it's the same thing you'd see if you go on to FOTMOP. We're not doing anything special here, but I want to highlight a couple of things because 2 trends continue to dominate our, let's say, legacy that we've created for ourselves in this run of form. One is XG continues to be minimal, indicating that we are very clinical with our finishing. We did have a lot higher shots than what we've been averaging over the last recent time, but again, only 4 shots on target and 3 are converted into goals. That tells you that we're dynamite with what we finish. But that other part is our possession. Again, like any time where we're not leading in the possession column against our opponent, we continue to do very well. Jason, anything on this that's kind of ringing out to you?
I think another important stat to point out here is 8 shots inside of the box. So that's good. We're not, we're still somehow scoring bangers from outside the box, but but those are just kind of the those worldies. The team is still trying to get into a decent position to take those shots.
I agree. And some fun facts on the night just to kind of breeze through them. There's some really important things that have been building in terms of the momentum of this club right now. One, Albert Diqua, Chico, gets another assist. So now he's not only beaten last year's record for assists on his MVP or on his Golden Boot year, but he's now doubled that record at 2 assists. He's also got the 3 goals. So in 4 games, 5 goal contributions. That's an incredible feat, whether you're putting them away or just helping other players do it. JJ Williams, I didn't even realize this stat until I saw it, tied now for first place again with Noah Fuson on assists, which, some people have questioned the productivity of him as a through and through goal scoring machine. I think he's doing exactly what we asked from him on the year. I think that without the lack of the wings on the production side of like getting the ball out to let him kind of collect himself and go back in for an aerial, score or opportunity, I think this is exactly what we'd like to see from him. But the really interesting one that I can't get over here is Rhode Island continues to tally up the goals scored via substitutes. We talked about scored against, didn't happen this time, but for us, with Zach now elevating RIFC to 7 different subs scoring, we're only now behind Sacramento Republic and Louisville City at 8. So like we're spreading the goals.
Pretty close there.
We're bringing them in late. We're almost changing that end of game management with the super sub impacts that we're having. And also with Zach's brace on the night, not only did it increase our substitution goals, but it also increased our total goal scorers to 13. I thought we were at 14 when I went to go pull the stat, and I didn't see Prince Sadie, so I thought because he had transferred, like his stats moved with him. Prince Sadie didn't score with us. I thought he had, and then I remembered the sitter that
The one goal that should have been
the goal that got away. Yeah. So I mean, listen, like this club is doing everything right now. Coach Kano has lit a fire under this group, and they are performing so far above my expectations. I mean, we both had draws on the game, and we were rewarded with a punishment of being wrong. I'll take it anytime we get 3 points.
anytime.
But it's crazy to think, like, can this team be stopped? And I don't know. Like, we're going to talk about that, but I don't know if this team can be stopped. And the reason I don't know if they can be stopped is because when Noah Fuson comes in and scores the fastest goal in club history at 53 seconds, you got to wonder, like, what's left to get done? I mean, that is something I don't, nobody usually sees that in soccer. And it can sometimes be dangerous. It can sometimes be a great thing. I think you've got some thoughts on that. But fastest goal in club history, 53 seconds. What was were you even watching the game yet, or were you kind of just settled into the night?
I was paying attention. I kind of didn't think it was going in, and you see the net bobble there. It was a slight deflection, not enough to, I'd say, like credit as an own goal. There was a slight little arc over like the back of the opposition's calf.
How dare you take that away from Noah Fuson? How dare you?
Speaking of people who are not ready, I don't think the Legion were ready because their back line looked kind of all out of sorts. So they're just like kind of like, dude, these Sprite kits are crazy.
We just put these on for the first time. Oh, what just happened? Yeah, no, it was wild. In fact, so much so that we tried to go and pull some records. And listen, I know there's an archivist who's watching us right now, and I can tell you right now that USL Archives is a dark and dangerous place. It's not what you want to think it is. It can be tough at times. So you tried on the day to pull some records. How'd that go?
I did a little bit of Googling and searching through some websites here and there. Junior Ito last year scored a goal in 22 seconds for the Riverhounds. This is USL League One, but Justin Dillon for Tacoma Defiance, 9.17 seconds. Tarnware scored one in 7 seconds for FC Tucson in 2022.
I'm familiar this year with Trevor Amon in Sacramento putting one up in about 20 seconds in the game. I know that was the fastest on the year, but we really couldn't find.
Yeah, so the USL Championship has a record book in PDF form. It looks like some other company made it. It's on their website that you can look at. It's pretty cool. It goes down by every team and then goes into different individual kind of stats. And so but it hasn't been updated since 2022. New Mexico scored a goal in 15 seconds, and then the second fastest one was 65 seconds. So definitely, I'd say maybe in that top 10, but there's some that are just right off the gates. There was a little bit of passing around before, we got our 53-second goal.
Tim writes in they aren't very good at posting their current game stats or rules either. I agree. It's something that they need to do better. Old Man Exo asks, any update on JJ's injury? So we'll talk a little bit about the injuries at the end. We don't know right now, just if we want to spoil that for you so you can go do whatever else you want to do. We're not sure about if it was just a knock and at the end of the night he just got through it, or if there was anything of significance to it. We also don't know about Nate Silvera being scratched from the on the injury report for the game. That was unusual. We don't know what happened there. So we have an injury report request out. Usually those don't get answered to us until Thursdays. But because there's no game this weekend, I think the club's just enjoying coming home from that winning victory feeling.
Yeah, I imagine it's a little harder to get some of that information too when a lot of the team is out of town.
Right. Well, I mean, no, the communications group has the ability to, but the team just doesn't want to be bugged if they don't have any requirements or responsibilities. Yeah. I'm always curious, like, who stays behind, and I'm like, did Clay stay behind for the weekend? Did Clay actually just stay? Is he down in Birmingham with his family right now? Because he does not have a game until next week. And did coach say, hey, you know what? Take the rest of the week off. Well, we know you put the work in at training.
Did you see some of those videos Kaylor Hodges posted afterwards for the game with all the families and everyone kind of having a reunion there? That was cool.
Yeah, in fact, Kaylor Hodges came in clutch on a video, which we'll talk about in a little bit, involving one Koke Vegas, because I In fact, let's just go there now. Unless, do you want to talk about the early goal? Actually, I don't want to skip ahead. Do you want to talk about that early goal and the danger of having a goal in the first minute? Because we've seen that before, and it does not always work out for you.
Yeah. So I mean, I was bringing this up yesterday. There are times when you can score too fast, right? You haven't felt out your opponent. You haven't earned your goal, quote unquote, because it happened, and it gives you a little bit of a false sense of security. And we did, to a certain extent, see that, where in that first half, Legion started to kind of possess and control the game and looked threatening, where we maybe for like 15 minutes or so didn't get much of the ball and kind of had to, suffer through a lot of their attacks. Ultimately, everything worked out fine, but there are times when it's like, you should have waited a few minutes to score.
Yeah, I mean, Birmingham, if they, besides the goal that they scored in the like 49th minute, they didn't really look dangerous in the second half, and only in the first maybe 20 minutes of the first half did they they really like try to respond like, oh, we didn't know that this is the game we were playing today, so let's try to equalize as early as possible.
Yeah, and then we kind of adjusted and kind of took control of the game there, as we'll get into. So you want to talk about this Koke?
I do want to, but one last thing that I thought was so funny is because we scored so early, when Birmingham equalized in the second half, there was a fan, I don't remember which one it was, but someone just went like, oh no, like they scored on us, and they thought we were losing because they had already forgotten, because that goal was already out of their mind. They had forgotten that we were already up one, and the only thing that had happened was an equalization. And then they were like, oh yeah, that's right. Noah did put that in the 53rd second. So yeah, I agree. And listen, we came out on top, so there's really nothing else to argue about it. If there's any key context here, it's that the club, they didn't lose control of this game. And that's, I think, when we'll kind of ask each other, was this one of the best games we've seen on the season? But yeah, let's get into Koke.
Yeah, real quick, Brian here saying they didn't look dangerous, just lots of possession, which gave the appearance of danger. I think that's kind of fair. When they were possessing the ball, they were getting in behind on the wings. The problem was that final pass right there was not always there. There was the one where the attacker kind of stepped on Koke's foot, but that one, the side of the net, for the most part, not too dangerous. But they were getting themselves in opportunities to make it. It's like that hockey assist there, like, right? There's potential for danger there. They just didn't capitalize on it.
Yeah. And you have to remember too, that one of the things for Rhode Island to be successful in this new style of play that they've adopted is they need a team to kind of start to overcommit. If they can't win the ball in transition in the midfield through like an interception or like a long pass, they have to wait for the opposing team to kind of draw themselves out, come further up the field, and then catch them on, whether even if it's a goal, like a shot on goal, like they have to let the team kind of come up the field a little bit so they can catch them in transition on that counter. And there were so many times where Birmingham did have meaningless possession, but they still advanced their way up the field slowly. And then the second that turnover happened and we had the ball again at ourselves, you saw Birmingham scramble all night, scramble defense. There was the Noah Fuson breakaway where if he had one extra step, that goal was, he had a second goal in the night, but there was a defender who just came screaming on a slide tackle. Yeah. So Birmingham did not have a good game. They were very unhinged on the night. So I think this was a masterclass from them. So yeah, let's get into Koke. Did Koke freeze? Because it sure looked like Koke just said, what if I just didn't try to block this goal? Like a very easy goal.
So yeah, at the time, I had not seen the video, so I didn't know. But it to me, I was just imagining that he was not prepared for it. Like you had mentioned earlier, Kaylor Hodges has a video that he was recording from behind the goal, and you can see that the defenders are obscuring his view. So like I kind of pause the frame, and as soon as you see the ball coming, it's too late.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's much you can do there. Optics wise, I know it doesn't look great when a keeper doesn't dive, but
it's so funny too, because back to Kaylor who recorded it, and we did repost that one. We reposted a lot of stuff because when you win, it's so much fun. But we tried to repost the things that mattered from Kaylor's account, and that was probably the most important video to watch. You're right, it's not great optics. Kaylor had joked in our interview last pod about like, why can't the ref just watch this game in slow motion from a VAR perspective like I am, right? and that's important to consider, that there are so many different angles. And I think sometimes we take for granted that, we have that God view. We've got that ability to like see everything. It's the same way when you're like, why didn't you just pass the ball to the left? Why did you go that direction? Well, like sometimes you can't make heads or tails from it. So I'm glad, because I really would have been, and I think some people at the guild were like, Lee would have stopped that. So we got to get that out of our vocabulary, everyone. But Bardic asks, why is Koke playing in front of defenders?
So there's kind of this new school of thought with goalkeepers to try and integrate them into the game more, right? To have them use their feet and actually pass the ball, as opposed to just like booting it as far as they can and just hoping someone gets it. So this mainly works when we see, like in the second half, where RIFC started to kind of claw back and control some more possession of the ball. It gives you another outlet for like a pass. So as our team presses and starts to suffocate and push the opposition back, he can kind of creep forward a little bit, have another defender kind of sit back there with him to kind of help him out, so that if something happens, he can do one of two things. They can pass back to him, because it's like playing with an extra man in a way.
Sure.
Or he can, we only remember the times where it doesn't work, but there are times when he comes up as a sweeper and just like, boots it into the other stand, right?
Yeah.
And we just remember the one time he got red carded.
And I mean, and that is the order of the business. It's not a back three with Koke Vegas. It's a back four. And when Koke comes up to receive a ball to relieve pressure, whether it's a retreat or it's an outward pass and it needs to go central, if Koke's on the inside of that line on either side, the other defender needs to drop deeper to be able to relieve pressure to Koke so that he doesn't have to just punt it. So you're going to see that in the the quote unquote modern era of this football. And that's why Koke, that's why we signed him. He's perfectly positioned to do that. He has the soccer IQ. He has the business end of it at his feet, where he knows what to do with it. And, outside of one game, I think he's made, maybe I'd say there's been two challenges on the year. There was the Monterey one very early, and then there was Memphis, where it's like, okay, I don't like seeing it, but I understand what's going on.
One more real quick thing here on Koke too. So if I dived into some of the passing stats a little more, and I've noticed a trend. So we've added some variation to our progression up the field now, because for a while, when this win form streak started, it started just from booting it long to JJ. So now this kind of evened out. So Koke's he's still passing to JJ, but he's also passing to Yao as well too. So there's balance there, where we're not always just going long, because the reality is, a lot of those long passes, I think the percentage of us controlling those is often somewhere around 50%. So there's a slight gamble there, right? If you don't have control of that midfield and you're not winning that second ball, or we've seen times where he kind of gets bullied and is not getting any help from the ref per se. We're passing out to one of our center backs, using our wingers who've been on a great run of form, and kind of moving up the ball that way.
Yeah, I mean, the best part of this whole thing is like, if Vegas ever is on bad form or has a bad night, we have Jackson Lee. Like this team, and like we'll go into the depth of it in a bit, but like this team's depth now, where maybe it was a bit shaky with all the injuries we had early on, and maybe we didn't quite understand how these players would combine with each other. But now that we're seeing Kano's vision come to light, like I'm so excited for this team to take the pitch anytime. And I'm starting to maybe overly eliminate my reservations of like, are we a bad team? Are we a team that could still lose? Like I'm starting to drink from the Kool-Aid of like, will we ever lose again? Right. And that's a problem, because statistically we know
to that early season, like over projections, like, yeah, we're gonna
not even
everyone.
Early season, like before the first game, like, we're going to take first in this league. We're going to get promoted to MLS just because we're that good. Speaking of MLS, another team in New England right now, not doing good, but we are #not an MLS podcast. I will say I had several fans who have communicated with me in the past, primarily season ticket members for the Revolution, reach out and go, hey, when are you doing one of those ticket giveaways next? Because I'd love to jump on that.
I just really quickly, because we're not an MLS podcast, but I saw some people on Twitter complaining, and then also pointing out like, hey, this other team here is doing good. Like, why can't we get our crap together?
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting next couple of years, not just because of the competitiveness of what both teams are trying to do, but then also with the Everett situation. Like, I can't really wait to see what the fallout is of that team, like, uprooting themselves. It'll be wild to watch. But again, let's stay focused.
Yeah, so now as we transition into one of our next talking points here, the game's tied up, right? We see in the 63rd minute, we see Clay come out, and we see one Zach Herivaux be brought into the fold.
We got a pair from the hair. All right. And not only does that rhyme for his last name, but have you seen that man's hair? It's glorious.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
That man needs a Head and Shoulders sponsor. He needs any hair product sponsor, whatever exists out there. That man needs to work on his branding and get that taken care of, get that squared away. Because my goodness, there's some people who never grew that much hair in their lives, and he's just running around with it like it's no big deal. Yeah, listen, Zach Herivaux, there's been some talk on Discord. I've heard it. There's been some people saying, what does his productivity look like? Why did we sign this player? We needed a 10. We needed a Jack P, and we got a Zach H. This doesn't make sense. And I would tell you to Silencio, Bruno, because you guys are all crazy. And you didn't give it enough time, which we didn't need to give it much time because we saw in almost instant impact since he's only joined the team 15 days ago. I want to be really clear here. He signed for us on July 3rd from Tampa Bay. He has played in 3 games. He has only played in 79 minutes. This man is incredible. He goes on to score a brace for the club against one of his first USL championship squads that he ever played for. And he hasn't scored since March 19th, 2023. Because remember, he was injured. He was injured a little bit, and then he was injured a lot of it. But then on top of that, not only has it been over a year since he scored, I think we talked about this when he signed. He's not a cam. He's not a Jack P. He's a CM, a CDM. He's a holding midfielder at worst, or just a defensive-minded 8 at best. And he still finds a way to put 2 into the back of the net against his former squad on the night. You can't ask for a better. The story writes itself. But then wait, there's more. 100th appearance. Come on. Just come on.
Maybe he is the opposite McGlynn, where McGlynn is kind of an 8 who thinks he's a 6, and Herivaux is a 6 who, plays like an 8. We haven't seen a ton of them, so I'll kind of wait to make my full judgment on that. But from what I've seen, he is, he's very dynamic going forward. So for him to say that he is a holding midfielder, that's not what I'm seeing out there.
Well, let's talk about what you're seeing. So up on the screen right now is our goals. It's our goal contribution per 90, goals and assists. And if you look, after just 3 games and 74, I said 79, it's 74 minutes. That's how much I'm overdoing this right now. Zach Herivaux is now second in our whole entire roster at 2.43. Sure. Is that wildly skewed because he's only played 74 minutes? Of course, that's how that works. That's how stats are. But when you look at the contribution and then you look at who the top 5 are, I mean, Jack Panayiotou is still there, right? Zach's above that. But then you've got Noah Fuson, you've got Chico, you've got JJ, you've got all of what we've kind of put into that goal contribution over a while. And the numbers are incredible. And I'm not saying this is consistent. I'm not pretending like this is sustainable. But for now, it is really hard. We already talked about Noah being a super sub, and he's like, or what if I'm just a lock-on starter? And now Isaac and Zachary getting these opportunities. These are transformational players. When teams die, they kill to have players like this that they can bring off the bench as weapons to change the game the way that these players are doing it. And I didn't have Zach on my radar. When I heard about the signing, I was like, okay, let me understand what he's all about. If this is what he can do in 3 games, what does the rest of the season have in store for us? I mean, is this that meme of oh, I want Jack Panayiotou, and oh, we have Jack Panayiotou at
home? Another interesting one is Isaac Anking has showed us some dynamism coming off the bench and giving us that kind of forward momentum, dragging the team forward, right? He was big there at the end of that Indy game. At this point, Jack's not coming back, right? And honestly, I I don't think we need him. You would take him if they would give him back to us, but this team has grown a lot in his absence. And I think you would kind of mention it. Maybe he kind of woke them up and showed them what their full potential was. And they're kind of like, hey, we can still do this. We have players that we can work around and do something similar. They're not the exact same type of qualities, but since he's come in, this team has gone on an upward trajectory. There was a few bumps there, but we're doing really good right now.
So even with this skewed goal and assist contribution per 90, his stats still run consistent across his 100 appearances in the league. What can you tell us about his time before he joined Rhode Island?
Yeah, so he's got 100 appearances, 6 goals and 1 assist. Two of those were just from last night.
Okay.
79 of those appearances came from his time at the Legion. So you'd kind of mentioned this, and we talked about this when he joined the squad, but he was really struggling with some major injuries there. So he hasn't had a lot of game time in the last 2 years. So there was some time when he played almost consistently for about 3 years for the Legion, and that he just kind of got derailed by those
and
injuries.
Kaler said that he left the squad with an injury. We know that he had the multiple injuries in Tampa, where Robbie Nielsen was like, this guy's perfect for a 3-5-2, but I just haven't been able to use him all year. And now he comes and joins us.
Yeah, that story was wild. That they're like, oh, you're concussed? It's cool. Let's just keep going.
So does this Haitian get player of the week? I mean, Chico got one for a brace last week. He gets a brace. Or is this the problem of being a substitute on the night?
Yeah, that's the only thing that would hesitate for me to say yes. There is that bench, so maybe we see him on there. I just don't know if he played enough minutes to get on there. We'll have to actually ask the USL guys if they know if there's like you have to at least play, let's say 1/2 or whatever it may be. Or if they're kind of
it's a minute cut over.
Yeah, I don't know what the
could be.
Or is it like, well, if you do a Robert Lewandowski and just score 5 goals in 9 minutes, so like we can't not put you.
It could be. Speaking of substitutions, though, that was a sub on. Let's talk about a sub off. Clay Holstead plays the fewest minutes that he's ever had in club history on the night. Subs off pretty early, at least for Clay Holstead. Gotta ask you, did Clay have a bad night? Was this yellow card watch? Was this minutes managed? I mean, his FOTMOB rating was a 6.9, but again, when you come off early and you didn't make any amazing contribution, what was, in your mind, what was the story behind this?
I'm gonna round that up and just say that's basically a 7. I think he's just set such a high standard for himself, so anything less than a stellar performance just maybe doesn't look great. Herivaux this was also a homecoming for him. So maybe coach just wanted to give him a respectable amount of time to kind of to show off and not just like, here's 4 garbage minutes. You know what I mean?
Sure.
We talked about Clay maybe potentially being a 10, but the reality is that's not like his skill set, right? Like when we've seen Ann King and we've seen Herivaux come on, they've been able to, and maybe it's just because it's that desire to prove themselves in the limited amount of time, but we've seen them like drag this team forward in a way that maybe we don't see from Clay. Clay is too much of a all-around player, and he excels at everything that he does, but he's also back there cleaning up. We don't see, I mean, not to say that the other two don't do that, but they're kind of that late attacking threat that kind of changes games in that way.
So it was interesting, because it's so alien to me to see Clay come off that early. We talked afterwards about, who has the most minutes on the year, because I thought it might be Clay, just because I feel like he's been a part of every game. So I'm going to ask you this question. We'll also throw it to fans before I put up the details here. But without cheating, Jason, who's actually played the most minutes on the year? Who do you think it is?
It's funny. I pulled some of this data for you. I already forgot it. I think it's actually Frank.
So you would be incorrect. Well, Frank's in the top 5, but
Okay.
it's actually Mark Ibarra at surprisingly he's got one. He doesn't have as many excuse me, he has the most starts at 19. He's 19 starts, so he's been in every single game. He does get subbed off, but because he's got that 19th game, which is kind of the differentiation oh man, I can't talk anymore tonight either. In relativity to the rest of it, Marky Barr is the guy, but Clay Holstead's right behind him. So Marky Barr, he sits at 15 or 1,596 minutes. Clay Holstead at 1,592. Basically, if Clay hadn't been pulled, he would be the top dog.
He would be number one. Yeah.
But then you've got Frank Nadarce at 1,578, Steven Turnbull at 1,574 minutes, and you've got Karifa Yao at 1,555 minutes. Basically, our entire defensive back line, which is weird because we've talked about chop change all season, but we've had some pretty good pillars in terms of not stagnation, but like consistency on that back line.
Yeah, and I think I kind of reiterated this last time, but when I refer to chop change, it's also the position that they're in, right? We've seen some of these players play all the three different center backing positions, left, center, and right, and then we've seen Clay moved around. You had kind of mentioned too, like, has Clay ever been subbed off? And it's only one other time this season with us, and that was on the Rowdies game, which we don't talk about.
I think every defender got subbed off in the
but it was
game.
It was at the 90th minute, so he basically played the whole game.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating to me is minus the start, something that you don't see on the screen right now. So you've got, just to read it for the audio only people, you've got Clay Holstead at 18 starts, Marky Barr at 19 starts, Karifa Yao at 17, Turnbull at 19, and Nadarce at 18. So basically, these guys have all played almost every game. The interesting one in terms of substitutions, like you said, with Clay only having 2, Marky Barra is at 8 substitutions, but Steven Turnbull 10. And that makes sense because we're burning through wingback. You know, he's running probably more than anyone. The fascinating one, our boy Karifa Yao, no substitutions. He sets his own terms. He's not started one game and he's subbed on in that game, but he's not been pulled off for anything, which I wanted to question that because I feel like Yao's had at least one bad game, but no, that hasn't happened.
I think it's just more like bad moments, right?
Speaking of bad moments, Bardic, aka Jason, other Jason, I don't want to talk about the Rowdies. My brother still rubs that in my face. I mean, he's in Florida, so he rub that in his face every single
time.
On
him.
So does this track for you though for minutes played? Does this line up?
Yeah, it makes sense. You want defensive solidity, right?
Agreed.
That's the one thing that we have somewhat been able to count on this season.
Now, with these minutes coming up, we do have a stretch of a stretch of games coming up with the yellow card management as well. Do you see any substitutions that need to come from these 5, or just keep on doing what you're doing and stay fit, stay healthy?
No, I think just keep rolling with it. Like in terms of, if we're talking about Clay, he's got 5 of his yellow cards from the first 8 matches. Since then, we've seen him been able to manage his game a lot better. We kind of thought that maybe he would miss this next North Carolina game, but at this point, you know, if he can stay steady until the derby, get the yellow card at the derby.
Listen, there was a little bit of dialogue in the Discord about this, and people were saying I was wrong, you were wrong. I was saying they were wrong back. It's healthy discourse, right? But the reality is this: is that there's a lot of talk right now out there about must-win games, and I just want to level everyone's expectations that must-win is not a term you use until you're at the mathematically eliminated sequencing of a game. Yes, these points matter right now because we're playing teams that are above us in the table, or we can get the 6-point transference and get further ahead. But these aren't if we lost this game that we all want to win, it's not going to change the standings to the point that we're eliminated from playoff contention yet. There's a magic number for a reason, and we're not there yet. So I would just say, for those that go around saying oh, North Carolina is going to be a must-win game and we need Clay there for it.
It's an important game, but to say must win makes it seem like we're getting knocked out or something
Right.
if we don't.
Right. The only other time I would assume must win should be applicable is when you're using it against something that's more optic focused, where it's an important game at home because it's signifying some historic moment, or it's a derby, or it has a legacy because the last time this team came in, they, opened the door, or they kicked your door down and made fun of you and left. Like, there has to be substance to it to make it matter as that quote unquote must win. I think, frankly, right now, the only game that does matter that we win is the Hartford return. It's the Clamico. And honestly, too, right now, I don't like that fans are just assuming that because Hartford's in such poor form that this is going to be like a pushover game. That game will come off of a 10-day a 10
Like a stretch of a
I
bunch of
can't talk
games.
a 10-game stretch where there's 3 games, and those 3 games consist of Detroit City, Indy 11, both away, and then Hartford. Like, this is no laughing matter. Like, we could have some serious rotation options. We could have some serious fatigue. Like, that will be the most important stretch. But the only game, really, in my opinion, is making sure that Hartford gets sent packing back to that godforsaken place that they live in, and we put the business to them for the day. So, like, in my opinion, and people can say I'm wrong, but that's also why we do this recording, so that we can put our opinions out there. But I want points from all 3, and we'll talk about the projections that Andrew set up and see if that will hold over. But for Clay now at this point, and I think to go back to why we even brought this up, if Clay misses any game at this point, it's just because of any yellow cards that do occur through the natural productivity of the night. But the game that I want to make sure we have our best 11 for remains to be Hartford.
Yeah, I think that one is important from an optics standpoint. Obviously, all games are important, but there's a bit of a rivalry there. They maybe aren't fully invested in it yet. Some people say so, considering the event that happened at the game. But
that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter to the casual fan. The casual fan will be built up to this like rivalry that they didn't know existed state to state, or they're in on it naturally because it's Connecticut versus Rhode Island, and we have to win outright for that. And yes, Tim, it is 3 games in 8 days, so it's Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday.
That's going to be rough.
That's going to be tough. But before we go on, let's talk about this yellow card stuff, because we were talking about what Clay could look like. We were kind of tracking to see, because we knew Clay was knocking on the door, but we didn't really know where the rest of it was. So we asked Andrew to show where are we at on our yellow card accumulations. I think, just so I can ask you this question, Jason, were you surprised when you saw this stat, and that it was in fact our highest yellows per 90 was one Kofi Messi?
Of course, it's Messi. With the coming in there with a 0.92 yellows per game.
So in his defense, he's playing a defender. He's picked up 3 yellows. He's basically picked up one every game.
He hasn't gotten a lot of minutes either. So
right.
It's fair.
Right. Where it really matters is more if you go higher back up that line, you'll see that the yellows per 90, it kind of can get a little crazier. So like you see the likes of Connor McGlynn with his yellows and his reds. I'm not
surprised with him, considering what 2 red cards, yellows here and there.
Right. Colin Smith in the same position as Grant Stoneman. The players in order of who has the most yellow cards accumulated after Clay: Frank Nodarce sitting at 5, and he's on a 0.34 per 90 because he's put in so many minutes. You've also got Chico, which after he earned his very cheeky simulation last night, puts him also at 5 yellows with a yellow per 90 at 0.34. And then after that, you've got, it's kind of split again. Karifa Yao, he's at 4 at 0.23. Mark Ibarra at 4 at 0.23. So all of the players that, should be getting these, I guess is the right way to say it, with maybe the exception of Chico, it's tracking. But if this does continue to run its form, and it should, because this is the way the team plays, a very physical game, we will start to see some suspensions. So that'll go back to that rotation, maybe after the next 4 or 5 games. But we should see some players have to sit out due to these yellow card accumulations, whether they get the extended merit of some good behavior and push 1 back down and they get to actually 8 yellows. You're going to see these players ride the bench.
Yeah, that makes sense. As we kind of get to the business end of the season, we might have to just kind of do without someone here and there, as long as we're managing it well and not letting too many players at the same time kind of all miss. I'm not concerned, especially with some of the players that have been putting some big performances up off the bench.
Yeah, speaking of the the business end of the season, looking back here now, if I were to ask you to rank the performances on the year so far, what do you got as the top 3 games of the year, or even just the top 1? What do you think our best game has been? And listeners, what do you think has been as well?
So when you initially asked me about this, the first thing that came to mind was that 5-2 Louisville game, right? Because that was huge. First place team in Eastern Conference, not even just Eastern Conference, the entire league actually, and to see them week after week go to everyone else's house and just bash them, you know, we were a little stunned in watching that game. After I kind of like sat on a little more though, I think this might actually be the one here. And the reason being is we've talked about this a lot. We don't see the team really close out games, right? Because even in that Louisville game, right, we were letting in goals and we had to respond. So we did respond, but like maybe that also could have just been a 3-0 win or something, right? And just we could have squashed the game, not had to worry about letting in those extra goals. El Paso maybe is a close one too, but I also just think that maybe they're so poor offensively that the team was never tested. We scored 2 early goals in that game, right? It was like 20, 30 minutes in, we're up 2-0 already. Then there was that long period of time we didn't score the third till like the 90th, where honestly kind of felt like not a lot happened. They were just defending.
But
And
wouldn't
trying
you
to,
argue that there were teams earlier in the season? Pittsburgh was at its worst form. Hartford was really, awful. North Carolina, when we played them, was last place. Even Miami is in last place, and we still only won that game 3-2. Wouldn't you say that that's a complete game? And I'm not saying I picked El Paso, but sometimes I look at like, hey, yeah, maybe the opponent didn't rise to the occasion, but also like you didn't make any mistakes in the night for them to capitalize.
yeah, but our offense was so dry early on in the season. It's hard for me to go back and champion one of those games. I mean, we can look back and say, hey, that was kind of a big deal that we were able to hold some of these high level teams. But we also look back on some of those and say, hey, we had the opportunities to actually take all 3 points there. And we just, were in some ways comically bad in front of net at times.
Okay. I mean, it's not a question that needs to be answered. It's a fun exercise on
Yeah.
trying to decide what may have been, and we go from there. I just know that I enjoy watching home wins more than anything. So the El Paso one resonates a little bit more, considering the other ones have all been away. So you take that for what it's worth. I mean, we now have 5 wins on the season, but only 1 in front of fans. So that has to have some merit to it. But yeah, we are now undefeated in 6 games, and we have fans now at the guild, people writing online. I saw it in a news article. This team refuses to lose. This team can't lose. Looking how we have this run of form, and now I am optimistic. What's the ceiling for this streak to continue? Is it indefinite? Is it that like we just never lose again, like people are joking or maybe being serious about? But with North Carolina, with Detroit City, with Indy 11 and Hartford all coming in a very close span of time, where do we see us dropping any points, if any? And I'll practice optimism there. Maybe we won't drop any points. Listeners, feel free to chime in where you guys think we may or may not drop any points.
If we're looking to the matches ahead, North Carolina, I don't know if we'll drop points, but I'm not gonna like right now say we'll win. That one, to me looks maybe a draw. The ones that I'd be a little more suspicious of are Detroit and Indy. That Detroit game was not great. Indy was a better one. We didn't start the game out well, but Indy, is still both of those teams look pretty strong in the West. I mean, we say this and we also beat Louisville home at their home 5-2, right?
Well, remember, we've told this. We've played to our competition's level, right? When they're really good, we play to that. We match it. When they're not doing well, we somehow match that too. So we I think we've moved past that. And I do love Tim, by the way. We're the Sudbury Blueberry Bulldogs. We're never going to lose again. Brian writes in, I'm happy with 7 points from those 4 games. I'd be great with that too. But then the question is, where do we drop those 3, Brian? You didn't answer the question completely, but I respect it. I don't know. I think personally that the game where we're the most at risk is probably Indy. It's the midway point between the Detroit game and then, of course, the Derby. I think Coach knows whether he likes to admit it or not, or says like, "Hey, we're taking this one game at a time." And
you think he's going to have one eye on the Hartford game there?
I think he has to. I think that's like, if the front office isn't saying like we need to sell this out, and this, like the Hartford win could easily sell the other 5,000 tickets that they're trying to accomplish. That could easily sell a 3-game, a 6-game package for casual fans to want to come back and get a taste of that next year at Tidewater without any other advertising for the year.
Oh yeah, if that game is sold out, has great fan atmosphere, and we see the team put out a big performance and beat their closest rivals here, that'll be huge.
Yeah. So depending on how tough the DC game, the Detroit City game is, whether we have to take it to them, they take it to us again. It's going to be on CBS. We've heard that Detroit's supporter group and like the experience there kind of gives them that 12th man at times. Like if that's a tough game, then what they say, put it all in on like rebounding for Indy 11, or it's like, hey, walk away from there with 1 point. Like, I don't know. Like this team's not going to ever play for a draw or a loss. Let's be honest. But like management of your roster is going to really come in clutch there. So I don't know how we treat this. I know that all the points, like we said, are important against these teams, but they're not must wins. I think if we drop points by accident or through the management of our rotation, it will probably come from the Indy side, because they did really well against us here. It's a Wednesday game, and we know that Hartford is coming just a few days after. So that's my theory on it. Fans have kind of chimed in. It'll be Detroit or Indy. Jason writes, and I want 13 points from those 4 games. So are you the person that says 7-1 scores every time in the league prediction? I don't know.
Is that you get an extra point if you win 400 rounders?
It just starts to compound. Oh, that'd be a fun way to do it. But let's get, okay. So we talked about the schedule ahead. We've talked about the run of form of this team. I want to get back to the formation though itself, right? We just mentioned a second ago about rotations, probably going to be key over these next 4 games. I asked you at the beginning, is this the starting 11? But what I really want to know is, we had other starters at the beginning of the season, and we thought that maybe those people were the lock-ons, and now they're fringe players, the rotation players, or they have to find a way to get back into the starting 11. You've got the likes of Connor McGlynn, who we thought was a lock-on starter. Gabriel Alves, lock-on starter. Kofi Chumesi, who showed us until his injury he should be a lock-on starter. Joe Brito playing the role of, plug the gap wherever is needed on this pitch, starter. What do these players, what are they going to need to do to get back into the starting 11? Or at this point, is it that they need to understand that their role will potentially be depth, and that's what needs to happen?
Well, there's still a decent amount of the season left for these players to get some minutes. 15 matches left. For Brito, I think he looked decent off the bench. Didn't he hit that ball towards Stefan, the one that got set up for the second Herivaux goal? I imagine he doesn't love it, but I think he generally plays better off the bench when he plays in like short bursts of, let's say, 15 to 30 minutes, where he can bring a spark. Especially when we're kind of taking it to the team. If we're struggling to break them down, I think at times, and Kaler brought this up last time, he can kind of maybe step on the position of some of our forwards, because he's a more forward-thinking player in that regards. So I think there's plenty of minutes for him to still get, throughout the season. Chumesi had a very short stint at right center back, and he looked phenomenal, right? We're like, oh, we've solved our back line. And then lo and behold, he got injured. I'll be curious to see, in terms of rotation, how many minutes he'll pick up now that Stoneman's back. Because I think Stoneman, Yao, and Nodarse probably is our best back line. I know there's another player that you mentioned, Alves. but I really think that he could find some minutes maybe somewhere else, little forward. So yeah, I would want to see Trumesi get some more opportunities to see if, to maybe push Yao, because Yao struggled early on, right? He was making mistakes, and he just made that amazing
Save.
clearance.
Like without that
Yeah,
save, this would have been another Miami
yeah,
scoreline, right? And I think that's fair. I think we've been so critical. I think the entire fan base, if you ask what their opinions on Karifa Yao is, they'll give you that like nervous smile, like love him, but don't trust him, right? And he's at times been a liability, whether it's his decision making or his speed. But also at the same time, like he's done some incredible things for this squad, and you can't deny the man of his accomplishments. And maybe this has just been him going through some growing pains. The reality is that like those decisive saves and defensive plays notwithstanding, I think he's a great defender. I really do. I just think that maybe Alves and Stoneman are higher up the table in terms of talent. No, Darcy, I can't see going anywhere. So I still have in my mind it's an Alves, Stoneman, and then no Darcy. I think Chumesi is redundant at this point, and maybe he ends up going into like a six opportunity, or when we need to substitute a player on the night, we end up pulling, Nodarse. Like we had to pull Nodarse on the last game for yellow card accumulation, right? Or not accumulation, but he was on a yellow. So I can see that being options. And like the crazy thing is like with all this depth, like I said earlier, like this is super exciting because we mentioned all these players. And then on top of that, you've got Zach Herivaux, you've got Colin Smith, you've got Isaac Anking. Anking didn't even get a sub on in this game. We didn't need him, but like you look what he did in the last stretch of games, and he's been transformative, right? So like again, the flexibility that coach can just implement on the day, whether it's the 45th minute or the 80th minute, like it's rewarding, but it's gonna create the problems that only a coach hates to have around what players does he bring with him, who dresses for the game, and then who actually starts.
yeah. Like speaking of Alves, whenever we see him play in those like left center back roles, he likes to creep forward and join in the attack. He is a very good passer. He can even hit some from long that we've seen test keepers. So I just think that he brings a lot to the team offensively. It's just I don't know if coach will allow him to, because as the team has gotten better now, like we talked about this last time, when we were kind of, I don't want to say struggling, but maybe didn't have the greatest performance against Indy. Part of it was Clay was like, what if I just kept creeping
all the way
slower and
back
slower
up
up
into
the
my old
field?
spot, right?
Right. So part of our solidity has come from those center backs being very strong in their positioning.
Yeah.
So if Alves starts to slide forward,
listen, we have to wait till Alves is fit. He should be eligible for the North Carolina game now. He should be back to full health. Tim writes in, I offered to drive him, I'm assuming it's Karifa, to the airport on his way out at the beginning of the season. Now I want him in every game. That should be on a Christmas card to Karifa Yao. Let's ask this question because it was asked at the Guild, and I think a lot of people struggled with it because it was a little bit weird, but I totally understand. I understand the merit behind it. But when we were talking, the question got floated around who that is currently a locked on sub, not a rotational player, not a fringe player, deserves a nod at a starting 11 spot. So like that would be your Aang King, your Herivaux currently, maybe like the Nathan Messers of the world. Colin Smith doesn't seem to ever be like in the starting conversation. We've tried to get him in there on the wrong Wednesday formation a couple times. Who do you have? Is it any of those players, or is it like Kevin Vang?
I would like to see Isaac and Zach at some point be given a chance to start and see if they can bring that thunder for the 90 minutes, right? Or is that something where they start to tail off? Game management. Do they wear themselves out too early, going too hard? That I don't know. Colin is an interesting one because there are times when he looks to bring that similar amount of dynamism off the bench, but it didn't really translate to anything, right? and I don't think this is his fault, but I think there are a lot of times when he was subbed on in games where we were struggling, and then we're like, well, look at this guy. He's trying to go for it. Like the Detroit game, I think, right? We brought him on. We weren't looking good. He was trying to drag the team forward, but the team was already in such like bad shape that he can't do it all by himself.
Yeah, but I love watching him have no fear and just take on defenders one-on-one. Like his willingness to go for it, and then maybe he loses the ball. Maybe he ends up getting past the defender, but then he's in like the wrong angle to run. I think we actually saw that last night where I think he beat his man, but it took him in a direction to a corner and there was no one there to support him. So he was like, well, I can't do anything but back pass this now.
Yeah, I'm not like writing him off or anything. I just think that we maybe need to see him try and show us a little something in those minutes that he's given, because a lot of the other players have. Right, we've seen Brito come off the bench against Louisville.
But Brito's able to swap for one of many players, like only Turnbull or a right center back, which is not his game.
Even not him, right? We've seen Ann King and we've seen Herivaux, and we've seen a lot of people come off the bench and bring that extra spark. And maybe he just hasn't got enough minutes in these recent games to do so. And maybe he needs a few more opportunities. But that's why I just wouldn't have him as high up that list of like potential bench players that maybe we should give a shout to start.
RIFC legend Nate Ski says it's King Isaac every time. Brian says it's Colin Isaac. I think we all agree it's one of the three of them that would. If they were on another team, they'd be getting starting minutes probably. Like if Hartford would kill to have one of those guys playing for them right now.
Yeah, there are some other players on there that are interesting, right? You mentioned Kevin Bang, Nathan Messer, that maybe we'd like to see a few more times, but we're not ready to say they need to be thrown in the mixer and get a full 90, you know?
Right. But that notwithstanding, we're in 8th place. We continue to climb this table. So let's end this on a high note. Let's talk about these table standings for the first time ever. Not in a basement. We're above the playoff line. Walk us through this record.
All right. So RIFC now has 25 points on a 5-10-4 record, moving up to that 8th place, like you said, for the time being.
Whoa. Time being? This is locked in. Locked in.
There are some games this weekend while we're not playing. We've got a positive goal difference, like we mentioned now, of 1, scoring 30 goals and letting in 29.
Who knew if you scored at least 2 goals a game for 6 games in a row, you could just unlock so many new opportunities for yourself?
Playoff bound, baby.
Hey, Diego, how you doing? So listen, playoffs, they're here. I love it. I'm happy that we're here. I wish we could end the season on this moment in time, but we can't. But I think what we're missing here, right? Because we envisioned that this would be a playoff at home team. We're only 6 points behind the final home playoff berth right now. So it's 31 points to 25.
And
with the teams that we have to get through to get there, like 6 points can go a long way in that flip.
Yeah, that can be those 6 pointers can be very important. There's outside of Charleston, Louisville, the point gap with everyone else is not that big, so there's potential to move up. That being said, the East is a stacked conference. There's still a lot of good teams. So we're now at 1.32 points per game. We talked earlier on the season a little while ago that like 1.4-ish is that kind of magic number, I think, to seal the deal. We've crept up, right? I felt like it was not long ago where like, we're at 0.97 or something. Like, we're getting pretty close there. In terms of our rivals there, so North Carolina FC is hosting Detroit City Friday night. Detroit's an interesting one. They've only played 16 games so far, so they're a little behind there. I imagine they're going to have a bunch of midweek games coming up throughout these last 2-3 months here we got. So I don't know, maybe that's potential 9 points for them to jump the table. Maybe they're better than a 6th place team. So only time will tell.
So let's talk about it. We've got the hillside projections up on the screen, and some updated ones there. I got to kill the ticker so that people can see the bottom of it where it matters, which is the point accumulation. And these are the three most conservative or three most likely outcomes. We've got kind of a conservative take, we've got a more modern or modest take on the points, and then we've got Andrew Hill's personal projections and kind of the quant work that he's been doing. And right now we're sitting on a range of, anywhere from 54 to 47 points. And we've said multiple times now that anything north of 45 is kind of like you're basically guaranteed to get into those playoffs. So we're on track for that. But more importantly, walk us through like the next 3 or 4 games that we see, like projection wise, even across all of those formats. Jason, does anything jump out at you that like these all kind of seem to be pretty steady in terms of the points that we can expect to grab?
Yeah, so North Carolina is a stubborn team. They are consistently one of the better defenses in the league. That being said, I think we can beat them. At worst, a draw. I don't think we'll lose to them. I think the team would really have to like capitulate to see us lose all 3 points there. Detroit's that one I'm just not sure of because we played so poor against them that it's hard to really gauge them, right? They just, like how good are they when we played like probably, one of the few worst games I think we've seen the team play. At this point, we probably can beat anybody. So I'm just
Fans, I'll ask you, how many points do you think we'll end on the season right now as it stands? Do we agree with one of these 3 columns? Do you have a different projection for yourself? Is there any game that's listed here that maybe any of these markers have as a potential win and you're like, why don't we have more points lined up for it? I'll be honest, I look at this and I do agree, like Indy and Detroit both have 1 to 0 points as a potential pickup. So if we keep these winning ways, right, or even just the undefeated streak alive, that puts us at least, we think with the win against North Carolina that we're hoping to get, the win that we demand against Hartford in El Clamico, and then maybe a point per each of the other teams, that still puts us at 8 points across the next 4 games. That's respectable. That's something that you can want to go out and see, and that continues to advance us up the table in the places that matter. So I think that time will tell. Right, again, there's no must wins yet. We'll find that probably around, just kind of looking at these projections, probably with about 7 more games is when it's going to start to get really tight on whether or not we'll continue to our playoff going ways.
And there is the reality that we don't know what the other teams are going to do, right? Everyone else could just start dropping points like flies. And then, we all of a sudden have an easier pathway forward. So it's just one of those week by week things where we're just going to kind of have to see where they're trending, how they're doing, and what's going on. And just to a certain extent, though, just worry about, hey, each game, just do the best we can.
Yeah. Listen, it's been fun talking soccer. We don't have to do the preview, so we're not going to go an hour and 95,000 extra minutes tonight. So I'd say let's start wrapping things up. Let's get through these events because there's some important things to announce on the event side of things here for the upcoming Rhode Island FC games.
Yeah, so quick reminder here. Our next game is at home on Saturday, July 27th, as we take on North Carolina FC in the second leg of the Eastern Conference matchup. That first one wasn't great. Hopefully this will be better.
I would say that outside of like losses like Tampa and Detroit, that was just our worst game in terms of.
It was like
so
pouring in Cary, North Carolina, I think that day too. It just looked like a miserable day out there.
Like we didn't learn anything from that game, right? Like we didn't learn if we could be better. We didn't learn if we were worse than we were. Like it was just like, okay, we went out on a field for 90 minutes and
it's
kicked
one
the ball
of the
around.
Games of all time. And so that match kicks off at 7:30 p.m. You can watch on NESN and ESPN Plus.
Yeah, then RIFC will travel away to Detroit City FC on Saturday, August 3rd at 4 p.m. This game's the big one. It's on CBS Prime. We're tentatively set. This is some fun news for Raising Anchor. We're tentatively set to have USL All Access and CBS broadcaster Devin Kerr on the podcast. He's committed, but we don't know if he's actually going to be able to do it. He's trying to tackle a lot at the time, so we'll see what happens. But he's made commitments to be on. He'll be previewing the match against Detroit and then kind of walking back as a look-see on what RIFC has done in their first year accomplishment so far, kind of mid-season. So we're hoping we can get that across the finish line for listeners. And then there's also, of course, an official watch party for the game. Spoiler alert, if you guys don't know this, if you haven't been on the website in a while, but Reddit NFC actually posted the remainder of the season's watch parties. So if you're like wanting to find something out in 2 months' time, they're all listed there now. We'll, of course, still give kind of the next two each time we talk. But if you want to plan ahead, like, great job on them to finally get the rest of the schedule out for the year. But that game official watch party will be at the 78 Pub in Johnston. So go hang out with the team if you want. I'm sure Chip will be there. Chip's been making a lot of appearances everywhere lately. But the official watch party, or excuse me, the Defiance watch party will continue to remain at the Guild. Now, the reason we're kind of talking about this, because we always know that it's at the Guild, is that the supporters group is working on something very important for the Derby. And they've kind of put a request out into their internal socials to see people that could meet up for an off-site thing to prepare for the game. So they're asking people to show up early for that game. So if it's at 4 o'clock, it's probably gonna be a little bit earlier, maybe 11 o'clock in the morning, maybe 1 o'clock. They have all of the comments and stuff loaded in socials in their supporter group channels. So if you're not a supporter group, you won't be able to see it. But if you're curious and you want to help, or if you're a regular fan and you'd like to get on the action to make sure that we, kind of prepare Burns Stadium for an invasion, so to speak, connect with them on the Discord, or the many ways that you can connect with the Defiant 1636 to help them get ready. They're going to need all hands on deck for what they have planned, and it's electric. So I'm super excited to see what they got going on.
Yeah, looking forward to that. So any last things before we get out of here?
No, man, it's been fun talking. 2 podcasts a week is it takes a lot out of you, like doing all the notes, doing all the examination, all the stats. It's a lot, but I'm happy to do it. Love everyone that's a part of this community, and can't wait to have the next episode in the coming week where we preview the North Carolina game. We do have an interview of a player coming up, which will kind of spoil that for next week. It probably drops on Tuesday, we're hoping, unless something gets in the way of that. So more to come, but as always, thank you for everyone that follows us. Please continue to do so. If you're not already subscribed to all of our different versions of channels, including YouTube. We're trying to get back on Twitter as a broadcast, but there's some issue with it, with like a premium contract. We're working through all of that. So we should be back on all forums like you've normally seen us in the past. And then, of course, you can listen to us on Spotify. But if you've been listening for a while now, we're over a year old, and you haven't rated us yet, or you haven't subscribed and followed on all those different platforms, we'd ask that you do. And I know that Jason's going to kind of tell you exactly where all those platforms are. So in the meantime, we love you all, and can't wait to see this team continue the run of form.
Yeah, thank you guys. We love you. Appreciate you. Make sure to check out our friends over at the Blazing Musket for all your New England soccer coverage, including RFC on and TikTok at RFC Podcast, Instagram at Raising Anchor, and there's that website, www.raisinganchorpodcast.com.
Anchor's up.
Anchor's up, buddy.